If the insurmountable number of directors' cuts editions of movies are anything to go by, art is never finished. Recently, an R-rated version of Batman v Superman was announced before the theatrical PG version even aired. It makes you think that the version you're watching in the cinema isn't the true version. However, this list isn't really focusing on that and is instead a collection of films that legitimately weren't released in their proper form for whatever reason. With this in mind, I'm Jules from Whatculture.com, and these are 8 classic movies that were released unfinished. Number 8. Death Proof. Death Proof comes across as essentially a B-movie, in that it's trashy, gory, and altogether inconsequential, which is strange from somebody like Tarantino, as his work, while paying homage to other genres, always ends up transcending them. This, however, feels like just basic replication. Well, it turns out that this is because Big T wanted to share screen time with fellow pulp film Planet Terror, as they were shown together on the same screening upon release. However, when the film reached international screens, we got a solo and much more extended release. It didn't really make the film better per se, and in many ways lost some of the in-joke vibes that it had in its paired initial releasing. Number 7. The Shining. The end of The Shining is as confusing as it is haunting. Jack Torrance freezes to death after being trapped in the Overlook Hotel's maze by his quick-thinking son. Then we cut to a slow zoom-in on a photo of the July 4th ball from 1921 with Jack himself front and center. It's a very strange ending, but one that kind of fits with the madness of the rest of the film. It turns out, though, that Kubrick pulled an extra scene from the ending just before the film was going to be released. The scene contained the hotel manager visiting Danny and Wendy in a hospital and telling them that Jack's body was never found. It turns out that this was taken out because test audiences found the double twist too much to handle, and Kubrick, being the master of auteur cinema, seemingly bowed to their wishes. Number 6. Star Wars. When you think of claims of Star Wars being released unfinished, you probably think of George Lucas's desperate attempts to justify the meddling attitude he took out on the countless special editions he released after the film came out. Well, it turns out that one subtle but altogether major feature was cut by Fox early on in A New Hope shooting. Lucas already had the groundwork for a 6-part story, and so wanted Episode 4 to appear on the top of the title crawl. Fox denied this and took it off because A, they didn't want to confuse the audience, and B, didn't want to tie themselves into something that might be a flop. It was only in 1981 when the now famous text appeared in the re-release of the film after Episode 5 had dropped. Number 5. The Magnificent Ambersons. Orson Welles' follow-up to his outstanding Citizen Kane was a drama charting the decline of an aristocratic family in the early 20th century. It also ran at 140 minutes in the original screening. Then it was cut down by RKO to only 88 minutes. That's a lot of content to drop. In fact, it completely rewrote the third act of the film. As a result, it's easy to see why it's on this list, as when you watch the original compared to the cut-down theatrical release, it's like watching 2 very different films. Number 4. The Hobbit. I'm not sure I really like the story behind this one. I loved the Lord of the Rings films, and I loved the Hobbit book growing up. But when I heard that there were going to be 3 films to be made of this very short book, I knew a lot of filler was probably going to be added. Lo and behold, we got 3 films which in my opinion were about as well paced as the Flash running in a 3-legged race while being paired with an alternate dimension Flash running in the opposite way. Have fun animating that. Then it turns out that Peter Jackson intentionally kept at least 20 minutes of each film so we could plot them into the extended cuts. And some of this content is pretty major, like finding out that the big lizard is working with Spooky Face all along, which kind of sucks because I really don't want to watch these again, let alone the extended versions to get the full impact. Number 3. Once Upon a Time in America. The defining version of this film is 229 minutes long, but because almost 4 hours is a hard sell, almost an hour and a half was cut for its international release. With the non-chronological story removed, a greater focus on the De Niro segments, and a general loss of tone which is evident if you watch both back to back. And this led to gaping plot holes and weird character shifts that mean that the theatrical release is a very confusing and often bumbling mess. Number 2. Cinema Paradiso. Here's another story about a film's length being drastically cut, but with a much more positive outcome. The flick was originally cut from 155 minutes to 123, but was done so with the aid of the director Giuseppe Tonatore. Therefore, when Cinema Paradiso was released, it had shed much of the fat in the trim and went on to major success. The entire third act of the film was removed, so it's hard to say which version is better, but when you know that the director gave the okay for this and it seems to be loved the world over, it's hard to recommend seeking out the original. And number 1, Blade Runner. Officially, there are 7 versions of this film, though for the sake of simplicity, let's just say that there are only 3 which are essential: the 1982 theatrical release, the 1992 director's cut, and the 2007 final cut. The version that dropped in 1982 was a product of test screening and contained a new voiceover and a tacked-on happy ending. Despite these poor elements, the film became a cult hit, to the point where Ridley Scott was eventually able to do away with the studio-mandated changes and, across its 10th and 25th anniversary releases, finally got his original vision realised. So which version is the best? Well, that's up to personal preference, but the real answer is the final cut, as if you'll excuse my French, it's f***ing glorious. And that's our list. Got any more films which came out incomplete? Well, let me know about them in the comments section below. And why not swing by whatculture.com for more news and daily articles like this every goddamn day. You can follow us here on Twitter, and as always, I've been Jules, you've been awesome, and I'll speak to you soon.